Hello and welcome to another episode of the PropSwap podcast. We are your hosts, Ian Epstein
and Luke Pergande.
And we are also the founders of PropSwap, the first marketplace to buy and sell sports bets. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We've got another great episode for you. We'll get into the NBA trade deadline news, some new legislation. But first, of course, we have to start with the big game, the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs come out on top in a high-scoring affair. I know just reading some stuff, the sports books, of course, won as majority of the money were on the Eagles. However, some bettors did very nicely in the high-scoring game. Obviously people love to bet the overs and the yeses. So, having multiple different players score touchdowns, was definitely beneficial to some bettors. But sports books will still be in business. They're not going out. The bettors didn't bankrupt them. But I thought first we would start with just talking about the playing surface, which obviously was brought up on telecast, but I feel like almost is not a big enough story for how much people were slipping. I mean, kickers, quarterbacks. I mean, there's even when Pacheco scored a touchdown, he tried to break out the little Uzi Vert dance and slipped trying to just dance in the end zone. It wasn't even just general things in the field of play. The Eagles offensive lineman Jordan Mailata said, quote, "It was like playing on a water park." The NFL spent 2 years and $800,000 growing this field, and they chose this particular grass because they thought it would hold up better during a week's worth of rehearsals and festivities, and just a lot of people, way more than normal people, walking on the grass beforehand. But how did they get it so wrong? Because clearly something went wrong along the way.
I just failed to understand how we're still having grass issues in 2023. We are building $5 billion stadiums. I think that's what SoFi cost. It cost $5 billion. And SoFi was good. Yeah. I don't want to throw SoFi under the bus because last year's Super Bowl, the service was fine. But we're spending many billions of dollars on stadiums and we still can't figure out the grass. It's laughable. So well, SoFi is turf, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. They don't roll out grass. Obviously Allegiant, they do roll out grass. And then of course State Farm, the game on Sunday, they did roll out grass. So I failed to understand how we're still having this issue. Both teams had to deal with it, but it did seem like the Eagles, Hassan Reddick had some slips. I didn't notice that Mailata was slipping, but both teams had to deal with it. But and then of course Jake Elliott basically ate it on a kickoff. Tons of errors, and I just layer that on to the officiating, which I'm sure we'll get to. The NFL just keeps shooting themselves in the foot, and the players, at what point do the players just throw their hands up and be like, let me just go play baseball or something?
Yeah, and so, there's been complaints by players about turf, right? Not being safe. It's funny, the next World Cup is going to be played in a bunch of different NFL stadiums, and for that event, they are going to be ripping up turf and putting in grass. In a lot of these stadiums for that event. And there was some NFL kicker that was like, so we can do that for the World Cup, but we can't do that for NFL. Right. But it just seems, so avoidable. I just don't know who to blame because, apparently the guy in charge of it is this 94-year-old man who they call the Sod Father. And he's been in charge of every Super Bowl field ever and World Series and Pro Bowls. And he said it was some of the best grass he's ever seen. Clearly that was incorrect. I don't want to blame him. Is it what they chose? And then the people who created this grass, out of Oklahoma State, they were quoted today being don't blame us. We're just the base layer. The Eagles actually use our base layer at their home stadium, and it's fine. So maybe I don't need to blame anyone, but I feel like someone needs to be blamed for
totally.
This. Maybe it was the paint. They had paint all over the field.
Okay. Totally agree with you. Didn't know it was Oklahoma State guys that also have sodded the link. And I did see that.
Well, it was the grass,
the base.
this grass called Tahoma 31, I read about this. It was developed at Oklahoma State, funded by the U.S. Golf Association. So really, it was like almost like it was made for golf originally.
Okay. Which is ironic because Waste Management, I was at Waste Management on Thursday and Saturday, the most attended golf tournament in the world, and the grass looked stunning. Like, it looked perfectly manicured. So, like, you would think that we could just use the same, it's like 20 minutes away from each other, the TPC Scottsdale and State Farm. You'd think we could just transfer that grass over there and we're all good and we can play a clean Super Bowl. But back quickly on the Sods Maker point, I did see that on Saturday. I'm like, so we're leaving it up to a 95-year-old guy who's going to decide a game that has billions of dollars hanging on it? Like, that seems a bit less than stellar. So, yeah, I did see that Sods Maker story. That old guy seemed a little bit suboptimal.
Yeah, sod father. But he has done it for a lot of years. But yeah, agreed. But I think we've reached the conclusion of grass talk. We've maxed out on the grass talk for this episode. But let's switch to the officiating. You thought was worse? That you thought was pretty bad? I mean, yes, that holding call at the end was ticky tack, but Bradbury even said after the game, he was like, yeah, that was a hold. I was just hoping I could get away with it. And I will say what I said again after the Chiefs-Bengals game, which is, yeah, it wasn't great, but guess what? That's what NFL officiating has come to. When you have 35 camera angles of something in slow motion, like, there's going to be things. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it was no better or worse than any of the other games I've watched recently.
Yeah. So to me, the question becomes, should we, I know there was a bunch of chatter on Twitter about this last night, like, should we have situational officiating? Like, okay, on the first drive of the game, if Mahomes had thrown a 12-yard pass and it missed, who got held? Was it Pacheco? Forgot who got held.
In the fourth quarter?
At the end of, yeah.
Yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster.
Juju. You know, if Juju had gotten held in early in the first quarter and Mahomes had like just missed him, like, okay, flag it. But in this situation, ball wasn't catchable, and I get it, it's defensive holding, it's not pass interference. I get that, different penalty. But like, to me, the question is, should we have situational officiating, meaning minute 57 left on the clock, penalty literally is going to give the Chiefs a new set of downs and have them win the game. That's decided the game. I just don't think you throw the flag there. Like, I agree. Was it holding? 100% yes. I get that. But, like, ball wasn't even close to being completed. I get it. Different between DPI and defensive holding. But, like, it's just at the end, in that situation, like, just keep the flag in your pocket. And I get why Olsen was so upset. I was literally saying the exact same thing to a couple of people I was watching the game with. Like, it's just... It's a question of situational officiating. So, my opinion, we should have it. Do we have rules drawn up? Is the next question for it. Like, you don't throw the flag in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left. You do throw the flag in the first quarter with 13 minutes left. Like, it gets, where do you draw the line is the question. But in general, I do think you should let players play. Just like, there's a bunch of Jordan NBA Finals games where, like, he was obviously pushed off against Brian Russell. They let it go. Guys push off on him, they let it go. Like, it just seems to me like at the end of games where we're deciding NBA Finals or Super Bowl matchups, like, let's just let them play.
Yeah, I mean, I think situational calls is a very slippery slope because then things could get out of hand. My feeling on it is like baseball, where, like, the umpire is going to have his strike zone, and granted, I think this all should change, but I'm just saying, but, like, the umpire kind of sets his strike zone in the first inning and kind of tells the players what's a ball, what's a strike based on, his calls early on, and just keep that, right? So whatever you were calling in the first inning, keep that in the ninth inning, right? And it shouldn't matter if it's a 3-0 count or 1-2 count. So I don't like the idea of calling something differently in the fourth quarter than you were in the first quarter.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what that conversation looked like. For the most part, I think they did a good job. Like, I really, to be honest, that might have been the only, I think there was an offensive lineman call I didn't like. But it was overall a well-called game. It just was unfortunate that, that call altered the game. Because he wasn't catching the ball.
Let me stop you there, because yes, it was unfortunate that penalty basically allowed the Chiefs to milk the clock and really not give the Eagles the ball back after that. But to say that altered the game, the Chiefs were still winning. The Chiefs scored on every offensive possession they had in the second half. I mean, like there was a lot of other probably plays earlier in the game that the Eagles defense did not step up to make, that if they had made those, then they wouldn't even be in the situation, right? I mean, Mahomes, made a great run for a first down. I mean, there was, and I give credit to the Eagles for not blaming the results of the game on that one penalty. But I think there was a lot of other things that the Eagles could have done differently to win that game and not let it come down to that.
Yeah, and there's this book called Scorecasting that talks about if the count in baseball is 1-2, baseball umpires, not purposely, but because they're social creatures and want the at bat to continue, they are more likely to call a ball on the next pitch than they are a strike, because if you call a ball, that play gets to continue. In this situation, I would have liked the referee to keep that flag in his pocket, because that continues the game. So say it's third down, Chiefs get a field goal, now they're up 3, we get more football to watch the Eagles try and come back and tie it, as opposed to this, call the flag, game's over, we don't get more football. And I think that the Tim Donaghy Netflix documentary, where Phil Jackson and I think it was Donaghy were recorded having a conversation, and Phil Jackson's the NBA, they don't want you to make that call. And he's like, well, maybe. And Phil Jackson's like, yeah, but you can't make that call on Michael, right? And it's there's drama to this. There is suggested outcomes that, or at least just let the game continue. I'm not saying there are, the NFL should want the Eagles to win, but just let the game continue and let the drama unfold.
Sure. Thank you for not using the S word, because I'm so sick of that.
That's laughable.
But Chiefs, end up coming out victorious. The cut to Andy Reid, and he looks wet, but we didn't see the actual Gatorade Bath, which was one of the things I was looking forward to, especially after our conversation with Sammy. And I'll get to what it was in a second, but pre-game on Sunday, the yellow-green color had moved to -135. It started out as the second or third favorite at plus 300 or plus 350, and moved to -135 by game time. Now, mind you, the Eagles were -120 on the money line. And so, as Sammy said, and I think we all agreed, it's only if there was going to be a yellow green, it was going to be on the Eagles. I did not think that no one really thought the Chiefs would be using a lime colored, green colored Gatorade when they're playing the Eagles, right? So it's that just seemed crazy to me that the yellow green odds were worse than the Eagles money line odds.
That was the Lane Johnson quote, right? Didn't Ravel? I saw Ravel on Saturday. I went to he had his promoting this kickstand alcohol beverage. We'll talk later about it, but Ravel tweeted, I think later Saturday, maybe Sunday, that it was because Lane Johnson said in an interview that we are doing yellow, or at least we have been doing yellow. And then, if that's true, if the Eagles are a lock to use yellow with a win, factor in a 10% chance the Chiefs would use yellow. So I get it being a little bit, heavier minus money than the Eagles money line.
Yeah, I think you're being generous on the 10%. If you're betting yellow, I don't know, if you're betting yellow green, you're betting on an Eagles win, so just take the -120. But either way, none of those things would have hit, because it was purple at 9-1, which I believe is the longest odds of Gatorade since they've been tracking it, which I don't know when that actually is, but huge upset of the night was the purple Gatorade. And then just a couple stats from the weekend. These are coming from GeoComply, which basically is the geolocation provider for a lot of the big sports betting apps like FanDuel and DraftKings, and just kind of shows just the ginormous growth of sports betting in this country. There were 100 million geolocation checks conducted on Saturday and Sunday alone. That is a 25% increase from last year's Super Bowl weekend. There were 7.4 million new accounts created over the weekend. That's a 32% increase from last year. More than 100,000 geolocation checks in and around State Farm Stadium, which this being the first Super Bowl held in a legal sports betting state. And then, of course, New York, Empire State, led the country with the most number of checks, almost 14 million during the weekend. Now, obviously, these increases from last year are helped a lot by the fact that new states like Ohio and a few other smaller ones have come on board since the last Super Bowl. But does anything stand out to you there?
Yeah, it's interesting. New York, since COVID, so many of those people have moved to Florida, Texas, I'm sure a little bit of Arizona. So that's awesome. They're still leading the charge. Yeah, I guess if you were to put a gun to my head, I would probably still lean a little bit New York, but the counterpoint to that would be in the summer for sure. But so many New Yorkers go south anyway pre-COVID during February, so that's interesting that they're still number one. Yeah, it would have been Illinois or Jersey would be my guess. So that's great.
Well, I have the other top three. Number 2 was Ohio, and number 3 was Pennsylvania.
Wow, look at Ohio. The Philly thing, sure. The Eagles being from Pennsylvania. That's great. Ohio's already up there. We've been in Ohio for a long time. We know how Ohio feels about their sports, and take it one step further, sports betting.
Yeah. And then just one other stat from the Super Bowl. This is coming from Kambi, which is a platform provider for a couple sports books, not any of the real big ones, but for Bet Rivers and for Barstool, although that is coming to an end soon. These said that same game parlays made up more than 1/3 of all bets placed pregame through their Kambi sports books, which as someone who came into this business in Vegas, I spent many Super Bowls working and just being around the festivities of Vegas PASPA. And first of all, and still to this day, there are no same game parlays in Nevada, right? And even during Super Bowl, it really, even when they could create some for you and you could bet on it, it still was not a huge thing. And so it's just mind-boggling to me that how popular these parlays have come. And so you've got, this huge menu of all these different props that you can bet, right? And yet still people are kind of going back to that same, let me parlay these anytime touchdown scores, like the first touchdown score with over passing yards and all this stuff. And just people love, betting something at plus 132 is not that as interesting as parlaying it with two other things and trying to get 7-1 on your money. And it is just yet another reason why the sports books cleaned up on Sunday.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, we would talk about it when you and I lived in Las Vegas. There are ways to hang odds on that stuff to cancel out the correlation. It's just put in some more VIG. And, if two outcomes are correlated, they were so afraid of hanging parlays on it just because things might have been 10 or 20% correlated. It's dude, just increase the margin on the VIG that you're taking and just hang it. People, you would make that up with the handle that these people are going to bet. Every single kid I know who bets on sports is betting same game parlays. Literally, I would say 95%. Let's say I'll take off 5% on that. 95% of my sports betting friends bet same game parlays because it's totally entertainment. No, everyone is in agreement. They're horrible bets. Everyone is in agreement. I'm probably giving up a ton of VIG on this. It's purely, let me make this next 3 hours more enjoyable than betting the Chiefs at plus 105.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I agree with you that the Vegas bookmakers are always very scared about a lot of people to parlay things that could be correlated. However, I think when it comes to this, do not underestimate their mentality of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And, we've been doing this for X number of years, so why layer in something different? I don't even think this idea even occurred to them that they should even try to do this thing. It was just because it didn't exist. Therefore, why do we need it? That would be my first thing. And then the second thing is literally think that part of the reason why why it doesn't happen today, because these see the popularity of it, right? I think, they probably dismissed it for a couple of years, and now they see the popularity of it. It's literally the technology. So not to get too into the weeds, but the Vegas, so like a BetMGM, for example, right? They've got a Vegas sports book, mobile sports book, then they've got sports books all over the country. It is a different app that you use for BetMGM Nevada than you use for BetMGM other states. And the reason is that the tech that they were using got grandfathered in, and it's this whole other different, like, to provide technology in that state, you need to be approved, and that process is extremely difficult and time-consuming and expensive, and no one wants to do it. So basically, every sports book in Nevada is using decades-old technology, and it literally just can't support it. So I think that's also part of the reason why they don't offer it today. But yeah, I sat in a meeting one time with this Vegas. I sat in a meeting with this Vegas sportsbook director one time, and I would put him in terms of like towards the top in terms of like forward thinking guys in Vegas. And this, wasn't related to what the meeting was about, but I was like, why don't you let people like parlay MLB division winners? Like, why can't I like parlay like the White Sox to win the AL Central with the Dodgers win the NL West? He's like, the correlated stuff. I'm like, what does one have to do with the other? Like literally there's absolutely no, the White Sox winning one division has no effect on the other division. And it's not a great state of affairs in that regard. But speaking of same game parlays, I think one of the reasons why they're so popular is the amount of, or the effort in which they push it to their customers. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm in Colorado. Mm-hmm. I'm signed up with all these sports books. Literally every day, I'm getting multiple emails from different sports books saying, "Hey, here's a free bet $10 same game parlay, and like if it loses, you'll get $10 back, or like bet 100, get 100." I mean, it's all they push, right? It's not like bet aside. It's always not just any parlay. It's always same game parlays, and it's really bad. I mean, it is. If you were a problem gambler and you were getting these things, they would be, or it's kind of predatory. And I think everyone who's lives in a sports betting state is now aware of all the ads that you get. FanDuel, DraftKings, just the TV ads everywhere, even if you're not in a sports betting state. And so last week, a New York congressman, Paul Tonko, introduced a bill to ban sports betting ads. It would essentially treat betting like cigarettes and ban all advertisements on any medium that is regulated by the FCC. So that's TV, radio, and internet. And essentially, sportsbooks would only be able to advertise in print media, billboards, and snail mail mailers. The congressman put out a fact sheet that pointed to terms like risk-free and no sweat bets as predatory, and specifically called out DraftKings for the fact that they spent $500 million in sales and marketing in 2020 alone, and $400 million just in the first half of 2021. I've been saying this from the beginning in the sense that the U.S. is basically, or I should say the U.K. is about 10 to 15 years ahead of the U.S. in terms of maturity of the market. And a couple years ago, the U.K. put a ban on sports books couldn't advertise during halftime of a soccer match, because the match would go to halftime and then it would be just 6 sports book commercials in a row saying, get your bets in for the second half. And so, I think this bill has a small chance to pass, but I think it's the first sign of lawmakers starting to get really ticked off about the amount of sports betting ads they're seeing.
They're not the only ones. Lawmakers, myself, no. I get it. It's nonstop. I will say, first of all, I missed the Gronk kick. How did that was that on TV? Did you have to log into FanDuel.com to see that?
Nope. It was literally it was a 30-second commercial. I honestly felt shorter than that, but it was during the third quarter. They literally cut to the field, and it was like I didn't even know, they gave you no time to prepare for it, and it was just like, hey, here's Gronk, he's going to kick a field goal, and from the angle, it was pretty dark out, and from the angle, it looked like he made it, and then they go, oh, he missed, and then it was it, and that was over.
Okay. We literally saw, I must have saw that Gronk with the African American lady in the office and Rob like on the street of LA or wherever that was. I must have seen that commercial 150 times. And then I literally didn't even see the stupid kick. So, well, that's sad he missed it for all of us FanDuel customers.
Well, no, it was like Gronk missed, but you'll still win. Like we're still giving away. I forget the number. Honestly, I don't know. Yeah, they're still giving away. I mean, I don't know for anything, but I gotta imagine that's going to go down as FanDuel's going to say that was not the most well executed plan.
Yeah, very weird. I think I must have peed for a minute and missed it. But yeah, overall, not great commercials. I thought the Jack Harlow one was the funniest one of the night. But yeah, very annoying promo, and then the fact that it was just not well done during the game was interesting for FD. But I don't think I saw a DK commercial, unless they ran their traditional Kevin Hart one. They ran times.
Yeah, I they all get jumbled up, but I mean, so do you like? I mean, this would be a death blow to. I mean, like, I should ask if something like this were to pass, whether this specifically or something similar. I mean, do you think this would like tremendously hurt sports books if they could not advertise on TV? Because I have a feeling that like people want to sports bet, right? I mean, people want to smoke cigarettes. Like they still somehow find a way to go buy, find out about cigarettes without any TV advertising. So it's like, do you think that the DraftKings, the FanDuel, these major sports books would be tremendously hurt, or people would still just go and find them?
Tremendously no. Hurt, yes. Tremendously no. No, they would both still be billion-dollar companies, easy. DraftKings would have, let's go back to 2021 early days. 2022 was one of the worst years for the stock market in a decade, but 2021 DraftKings market cap was $30 billion. They're still a $10 to $15 billion company. It would hurt them, of course. Like spend $1 billion or spend $50 million in advertising a year. Like, of course, it's going to hurt your top line, but they're both still billion-dollar companies, FD and DK. And obviously, you're still going to get, every time you walk into a brick and mortar casino, obviously you can do whatever you want on private property. So, inside of Vegas, you'd still be able to advertise all over the Vegas casinos to, hey, $1 MGM bet back in New York. So hurt the sports betting companies, yes, but tremendously no. I think people would still do it.
I mean, I would love to see something that like would ban certain words and like would like force them to get more creative with some of these advertisements, because like it's just a played out thing where it's just like get a risk free this or a sweat free that, like banning those words I feel like would maybe just make them think outside the box in terms of and not hopefully no more kicks or whatever, but and, almost I would feel like this if they did ban. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, DraftKings still has a sports book at TPC Scottsdale, so their signage was all over the whole golf tournament. They'd still have a sports book inside of Wrigley Field. FanDuel still has one at Meadowlands. Like, there's still some unique ways that you can get to customers. Like, Wrigley Field and, the Meadowlands are iconic places that a ton of sports fans go anyway. So they'd still get to customers. It would hurt them, to be clear. I'm not saying that, like, if this ban passed, which I don't think it's going to happen because those guys have way too they pay their lobbyists enough money to squash that, but they have a ton of team owners in bed with them now, but it would hurt them. But I don't think tremendously. I still think they'd be multi-billion-dollar market cap companies.
I agree. I almost feel like it would almost protect themselves from spending too much money on advertisement. Like all of a sudden, maybe DraftKings would become a little more profitable if they weren't spending that much money. But like I said, cigarette companies have found out a way, so I'm sure they would figure out a way if something like this did pass. But with that being said, let's get to some sports betting. It's that time of the episode for Stake or Swap. First up, talk a little NBA. Last week was the trade deadline, and it was definitely highlighted by the move of Kevin Durant from Brooklyn to Phoenix. It's rare that, Kevin Durant's probably a top 15 player all time. So it's rare to see a guy like that get moved in season in a trade. The Suns were 19-1 before the news broke that night. And then now they are the second favorite at plus 450. So that's a huge move from 19-1 to plus 450. I'll go first. I'm going to swap the Suns at plus 450. Now, look, I love Kevin Durant. He is one of the most malleable superstars he's out there, meaning that like he can fit into different situations, unlike a lot of other superstars where it's like he can only play one way and it has to move through them. Like, he fit with the Warriors and what they were doing. Then he went to Brooklyn and, he fit, he was playing great there before he got hurt. So I think he can fit there, but I still can't think of an example of a team winning the championship that acquired like their best player in season, or like or even their second best player. Like if a good team is rolling and they acquire like a role player, we need some 3-point shooting. Let's get a great 3-point shooter. Or like, we got a great sixth man who's now going to come off the bench and give us a spark. Like that's kind of what like I think pushes teams over the edge for championship. But like I can't think of an example where it's like, cool, now we're just going to run the whole offense through this new guy. Now, again, like I said, he can adjust, but for those reasons, and the injuries, right? Kevin Durant's currently hurt. He's going to come back in a couple weeks, but like he could get hurt again. Devin Booker, he was hurt, just came back. Chris Paul's 37. He can get hurt at any time and always seems to get hurt during the playoffs after like a whole season. So, between injuries and just adding a new piece, and if you got 19-1 or higher before the trade, and now they're plus 450, I am swapping the Suns right now.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point on acquiring a superstar, to drastically increase your win-loss record versus cruising and then add a role player to just throw some gasoline on the fire. So I will also swap the Suns. Plus 450 is so low with the way the Boston Celtics have been playing. The Warriors, I know Steph's been hurt, but the Warriors were still single digits. They'd, of course, have to play the Warriors to get to the NBA Finals. And to your point of Chris Paul's age, like, I agree with all that. I would also swap the Phoenix Suns. I'm rooting for KD. I want him to show that he can do it on a team not named Golden State. So I wish he would play the media game better, but he honestly generally seems like a good person. He seems like a nice guy. I love his philanthropic efforts. It's cool that he has a VC fund. So I'm rooting for the guy. It's cool to see Phoenix go. We both are University of Arizona guys. I want Phoenix to succeed, but that's a super fair point about Chris Paul's age and the infrequency of teams acquiring a stud before the break and just drastically improving their team. It takes so much time to gel. That's, final point to this would be when basketball superstars meet on the same team, it takes them so long to figure each other's shooting spots out and when to pass versus when to shoot. James Harden and Joel Embiid still really haven't figured it out. It's I think that's their third season now together, or maybe just season and a half. But it took Embiid and James Harden so long to figure out that cohesiveness. It took the big three in Miami a while to figure it out. It is a long road to feeling each other out and gelling superstars on the same team. So for all those reasons, I will also swap Phoenix.
Yeah, just on that point, I was listening to a podcast, and Raja Bell, who ironically used to play for the Suns, was talking about Steve Nash and how great of a point guard he was. And through the years of playing with each other, Steve Nash not only knew where you wanted the ball on the court, but literally high, low, I'm running to the basket, but he's he knew I didn't like it on this side of the basket, so he let me go under the hoop to then pass it. So granted, Steve Nash is kind of one of a kind from the point guard, but just to your point about the amount of time it takes to gel in terms of where the player wants is best suited to take a shot. Also, I'll just add that you said the Warriors are single digits. They're actually 16-1 now. The Warriors are
pre Curry injury,
injury. Yeah. And so I mean that just last thing, but the West is so jumbled up, and it's yes, the Warriors are a little banged up right now. They're not playing great basketball, but if they all get healthy in the playoffs, that's not a team you want to see. Even if you have home court advantage, there's some other really good teams in the West. Switching sports, we'll talk a little hockey. The Bruins right now, also one of the top favorites, also plus 450. Luke, we'll start with you first. Are you staking or swapping the Bruins at plus 450?
Yeah, our first hockey staker swap here since I believe opening night. We talked about the Bruins and the Golden Knights, I believe. Plus 450 on a hockey team that has to go through so many 7-game series to win the Stanley Cup. No, I am swapping plus 450 in the Boston Bruins. The Avalanche look incredible as they did last year. There's so many hoops to jump through. I'm not saying the Boston Bruins are a bad team, to be clear. They're a good hockey team, but plus 450 in February with the Canes and the Leafs and the Lightning and the Oilers, there's just such a gauntlet to go through. And then Pasta is they call him David Pastrnak. His nickname's Pasta. He has 72 points. That is out of control. I don't think that continues. He's a really good hockey player, but I think he reverts to the mean in the second half of the season. Marchand always gets hurt. He's got 46 points. David Krejci, they were ready to trade David Krejci a year and a half ago. So he's got 42 points. Bergey's got 38. Bergey's he's got to be 36 by now. Patrice Bergeron, nicknamed Bergey. The X factor here, they added Taylor Hall last season. That was a really good addition. Taylor Hall is an excellent hockey player. He added some young energy to the team. Those top guys, Bergey, Pastrnak, Marchand, have all been together for a super long time. To add in Taylor Hall to that lineup was really smart. But again, just plus 450. You got to go through all those teams to get to the Stanley Cup. I have to swap that number.
And I don't know if I mentioned, but they were 28-1 before the season, right? So there was definitely some juicy double-digit numbers out there for the first month or so of the season. I will say this in their favor: they are second in the league in goals for and first in the league in goals against. So I mean, there is a reason right now why they're so favored. But I will say this, and because I don't follow hockey as close as you do, but this I think applies to a lot of almost every other sport where there's something to be said about peaking too early. And so if they are playing their best hockey right now, they are inevitably going to hit a slump, and you don't want to hit that slump in April and May. It's unreasonable to think that they're going to sustain this for the rest of the season and into the playoffs. So I think they will hit a slump, and then I think that slump will affect them negatively come playoff time when they're not playing their best hockey. So I'm with you. I'm going to swap the Bruins as well. A football officially in the books. It is now time to start prepping for March Madness. Definitely much more to come about that tournament in the coming weeks, and then the Masters, and then NBA and NHL playoffs. So not to fear, still plenty to talk about, tons to bet on, tons to sell. So thank you for joining us this week. Please make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and we will talk to you next week.